So, have you ever really thought about it? When you put your hard-earned money into a bank account, you just trust it's safe. But who's actually making sure it is? What's stopping a bank from just going bust and taking your cash with it?
Well, the answer is actually a pretty fascinating story about rules and regulations. Today, we're going to trace the history of banking in India to find out how one crucial set of rules turned a totally chaotic system into something you can rely on. All right, let's get into it.
So here's the game plan. We'll kick things off with the very first banks, then look at the unstable mess that followed. We'll see how a central bank came to be, dive deep into the rulebook that gave it its power, and finally connect it all to how your money is protected today.
All right, let's jump in our time machine and go back more than 200 years. This was basically the Wild West of finance. There were no real rulebooks, no central authority. It was a free-for-all.
Now, it's not like there was no banking before this. India had a really strong system of indigenous bankers for ages. But what we're talking about here is the start of formal, structured banking as we know it, which really kicked off in the late 1700s. This was the beginning of a whole new era.
And you can see how things started picking up steam pretty fast. You have the first couple of banks popping up around 1786. Then came the heavy hitters, the three presidency banks in Bengal, Bombay, and Madras. For a long time, they were the big dogs, almost acting like central banks themselves. Then, in 1925, they all merged into one giant entity, the Imperial Bank of India.
Okay, so you've got all this growth, right? Sounds great, but, well, it came with some serious growing pains. The system was crying out for a referee.
Think of it like a gold rush, but for banks. The Swadeshi movement fueled this huge wave of patriotism, encouraging Indians to start their own banks. So, in the early 1900s, bam! Hundreds of new banks just appeared. And while that spirit of self-reliance was amazing, doing it without any real oversight was, let's be honest, a recipe for disaster. And yeah, disaster is exactly what happened. A lot of these new banks just failed. They went under, and they took people's life savings with them. This created a massive problem. People lost all confidence in the banking system. And if you're scared to put your money in a bank, the whole economy grinds to a halt. This quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? The system was basically a free-for-all. It was private, it was disorganized, and anyone could do pretty much whatever they wanted. It became painfully obvious that for this to work, there had to be rules.
So the solution? Well, the first big step was creating a boss, a central authority, a bank for the banks that could actually oversee the whole show.
The ball really got rolling in 1926, when a commission recommended creating a central bank. That led to the RBI Act being passed in 1934, and by 1935, the Reserve Bank of India was officially in business. But here's a fun fact. It actually started out as a private bank. It wasn't until 1949, after independence, that it was nationalized and became the government-owned institution we know today.
So what was the RBI's job exactly? It had a huge mission right from the get-go. Keep the currency stable, manage the country's money supply, and, this is the big one, supervise all the other banks to make sure that earlier chaos never happened again.
But you know, having a central bank is one thing. Giving it actual power, giving it teeth, that's another. And for that, you need a law. You need an official rulebook. And this is really where the game changes. You have the RBI, which is great. But now it's time to give them the tools to actually do their job and bring some serious order to the financial world.
And here it is. March 16, 1949, the Banking Companies Act comes into force. It gets a name change later on to the Banking Regulation Act, but the purpose was exactly the same. This was the moment modern regulated banking in India was truly born.
You know, the first thing the Act did was something that sounds super simple, but was actually a huge deal. It legally defined what a bank even is, taking money from the public with the goal of lending it or investing it. That simple, clear definition became the foundation for everything else. And the whole point of this act? It was crystal clear. It was all about you, the depositor. The number one goal was to protect the interests of regular people and build a system that was strong, stable, and something everyone could finally trust. Okay, so that's the history lesson, but let's bring it to today. How does some law from way back in 1949 protect your money right now in your bank account? It's actually pretty simple. That 1949 Act, it's the document that gives the RBI all its muscle. It's the legal framework, the source code of its power, that lets it be the ultimate supervisor of every single bank in the country.
So what kind of power are we talking about? Well, it's the whole shebang. The RBI decides who even gets a license to start a bank. It keeps an eye on the people in charge, it sets the rules for audits and inspections, it has a say in mergers, and here's the ultimate trump card. It can issue direct orders to any bank at any time if it thinks it's for the public good.
I mean, this quote just says it all, right? Before this act, banks could behave however they wanted. After the act, the RBI had the power to control that behavior. Simple as that. So let's circle all the way back to that first question we asked. Who guarantees your money is safe? It's not one person. It's this whole system. It's the rules from that 1949 Act, enforced by the RBI, that make sure our banks are stable, well-run, and that your money is secure.
And that brings us right up to the present. Banking is changing at lightning speed, with digital payments, crypto, and all sorts of fintech innovations. So the big question for the future is, how do we take these foundational rules that were born from chaos decades ago, and adapt them to keep us safe in a digital world we're still figuring out?